Gautham, and we have a fantastic episode for you today. Gowie, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I think we're at 73 days until opening day, so we're getting very close, and I'm getting very, very excited.
Me too. We pitchers and catchers report in I think 30 days for some teams. So we're at the point where MLB Pipeline is starting to put out their top prospect lists. I think so far we've only got top 10 left-handed pitchers and top 10 right-handed pitchers. And they're doing the by position first. So we'll be seeing those roll out. I assume it's one a day is how they're doing it. And then we'll get our top 30s per team. Then we'll get our top 100. And I'm really, really excited to see how those all turn out. Because that's always kind of the first thing into the new season is you start seeing all these lists come out, all these power rankings. Then you get to spring training and everything takes off from there. So we've got a pretty brief This Week in Baseball today, but then we want to focus a majority of our time on the conversation that we've got for you. And I don't know if the title is giving it away, but the title of this episode is The House That Getaway Day Built. So let you dwell on that for a minute and see if you can figure out what we're going to do. But before we get into that, we do have a couple of free agents who have gone to new teams. So Gowie, you want to update us on a few of these players?
Sure. So the first team is the Marlins, and the Marlins have signed Johnny Cueto to be a part of their starting rotation. Johnny Cueto had a really good bounce back season last year. He was 36, be 37 this upcoming season, but with the White Sox, he had a 3.50 ERA, over 176 innings. So that was the best year he had in some time. Probably since 2018, he hasn't had a season as good. So the Marlins kind of get a fairly reliable guy that can at least eat some innings for them and gives them some more depth there. We talked about that in recent weeks, how they do have good starting pitchers, but that doesn't mean that they can necessarily just trade away from that and it help the team as a whole.
Yeah, especially with guys like Max Meyer and Sixto Sanchez still being on the injured list. Like that significantly hinders their ability to trade away from their strength. So, but yeah, and so then, I think that's a really interesting signing. Like Johnny Cueto is kind of one of those guys that the past couple of years he's not really been. He hasn't been the same Johnny Cueto since he was in Cincinnati, basically. And I think his first year in his first full year in San Francisco, he was still really, really good. But since then, he's kind of just not pitched well. He didn't really pitch much in 18, 19, or 20 at all. He actually pitched more in 2022 than he did in 18, 19, and 20 combined. So this will be a really interesting year for Johnny Cueto. So.
Yeah, and the Marlins also made a trade. They traded their longtime shortstop Miguel Rojas to the Dodgers, who actually was a Dodger initially before he was traded to Miami. So things coming full circle there. I guess the Dodgers must have concerns about Gavin Lux taking the reins from Trey Turner this upcoming season. They've got a guy that surely can handle the shortstop position in Rojas, but Rojas is not really much of a offensive force.
Yeah, and I think this is a decent move for the Dodgers from the standpoint of now they're without Trey, they're without Corey Seager, so like they kind of have a hole there. You have Gavin Lux, who could slot back at shortstop, but he's been playing center field, he's been playing second base, and he's shown that he's pretty solid at all those different positions. So bringing in Miggy Rojas allows you to kind of continue to use Gavin Lux as kind of the new version of Chris Taylor.
Even though Chris Taylor's still there, but yeah,
well, yeah,
I see what you mean.
But Chris Taylor's old and decrepit now. So, but no, I
Poor
mean,
guy.
but if you think about it, they did it with Kike, and then they did it with Chris Taylor while Kike was still there, and then Kike left, and then they continued doing it, and then now it's passing the torch on Deluxe as the super utility. So
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, the Dodgers always really emphasize these guys that can play multiple positions. They have the same thing with like young prospect who may be playing a lot more this season, Miguel Vargas, a guy who can play third base, can play second base. Um, Having as many pieces that can fit in as many spots as possible is always valuable to have on your team. And
so
then
I do want to test you just real quick. Uh, do you remember who else was in the trade that originally sent Miggy Rojas to the Marlins?
I can't say that I do. I know it happened in like 2014.
So, ironically, a guy that I literally just said was kind of in the jumble of like guys
Oh,
moving,
Kike.
passing torches. Kike
It's
was in that
Kike.
trade,
Yeah.
but it was D. Gordon and Dan Herron, um, who went to the Dodgers for Austin Barnes, Chris Hatcher, Andrew Heaney, and Kike.
Wow, that's a very interesting trade.
Yeah. So that's definitely one that I think we're going to probably dissect off the pod. But there's been a couple other moves that have happened here this week as well. We did see Andrew McCutchen go back to his original team, the Pittsburgh Pirates, on a 1-year, $5 million deal. And I thought this was really interesting because the Pirates are not going anywhere this year, period. They're kind of being strong armed by Brian Reynolds to trade him. They're yet to bring up Henry Davis. They brought up O'Neal Cruz and Ke'Bryan Hayes and gave Hayes the big contract, but still tiny contract in the scheme of things. But it doesn't really seem like this is a move that's like going to be a competitive team. So is Kutch coming back to retire?
I don't see him as a guy that's just gonna try to mail it in or just try to have some, farewell tour with the Pirates. Like I feel like he's a really competitive guy and he is doing it for a specific reason, and that's to help the team. And in his eyes, he sees the Pirates being closer to contention than maybe you and I do. Maybe 2024. Maybe they'll surprise this year. Probably not, but he that's what I think that he thinks.
That's fair. The reason I asked though is because now he was on Pittsburgh originally for years. He won like the 2013 MVP.
2013 MVP. Yeah.
I think he won a Rookie of the Year as well. If he didn't
think so. No.
Okay. But so he won the 2013 MVP, had a phenomenal career in Pittsburgh the first time around. Got traded to the Yankees, played there for a bit, went to the Phillies, played there for a couple of years, went to the Brewers on a 1-year deal. It is now on the Pirates back for a 1-year deal. Like it feels like he's a guy who's played for a long time. I think he debuted in maybe 2009.
2009. Yep. He's got 14 years. And you forgot he played for the Giants for half a season. That was actually the Brian Reynolds trade.
I forgot about
now he
that.
gets to play with Brian Reynolds.
Interesting. I did not remember him going to the I still don't remember him on the Giants. Like it just does not make sense to me.
And then he got traded to the Yankees mid-season.
Okay. So, but yeah, he's a guy who's now on, or he's been on like what? Is that 6 teams?
1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. It's 5 teams.
Okay. 5 teams, 6 different stretches, 14 years in. He's still a productive player on a 1-year deal back to the team he started with. It kind of feels like it might be he's considering retiring soon, and he's going to play 1-year deals and stay in Pittsburgh till he does, because he's a guy that I think he wants to go out while he's still good. I don't think he wants to like tank and then retire, but it just, that signing really struck me as like are we getting close to the end of his career? And the answer logically is yes. But
yeah, I'm curious to see what happens mid-season if the Pirates season kind of goes how we expect it to go and they're very bad. Does he become a guy that's a trade chip, or is he just going to be wanting to stay in Pittsburgh? Because I feel like he hasn't played on a bad team in years now. He's played on competitive teams since he was on the bad Pirates, which was a very long time ago now. Um,
Yeah,
maybe a half season of bad baseball, he'll want to kind of
because
say,
he was basically the catalyst to get them to their first postseason
yeah, he was
in 20
the
years.
major reason of the good Pirates, the what 3 years that they made the playoffs in a row.
Yeah, so it was him.
Yeah.
I think Starling Marte there in the third year of that. And then, oh shoot, was that the catcher who was on the Jays then? Or
Oh, John Jaso.
no, not John Jaso. Um, he went to the Dodgers. Was there just a couple years ago? Was the backup Russell Martin? Was that the Russell
Oh,
Martin seasons?
maybe. They were really good in like 2014, 2015 with
Uh,
Garrett Cole.
let's see. Yeah, in the interest of time, we do have two more free agent signings. You want to break down? I know one of them is near and dear to you, and then the other one not so much. But I honestly don't remember who we went to, so I'm putting that on you.
That's funny. Okay, Trey Mancini signed with the Cubs, 2-year deal. He's going to play some first base with Eric Hosmer, and he's going to probably DH a good bit. Mancini really struggled after he got traded to the Astros last year from Baltimore. Um, he's a lot better than he showed in that second half of the season, but he's a solid player, and he's had a 35 home run season on his track record. So kind of what the Cubs need, a little bit more power in the lineup. And I mean, just another good hitter. Good to have.
I actually hate this move for one very specific reason. I like Trey Mancini, and I hate the Cubs, so not allowed. Can I go veto this in the commissioner's office?
I don't think you can. And the Cubs are kind of making themselves extremely likable for the 2023 season with Cody Bellinger, Dansby Swanson, Tucker Barnhart, one of your personal favorites.
I do love Tucker Barnhart. I actually thought about DMing him on Twitter the other day just to see if he'd come on this podcast. I still might, to be honest with you.
I think you should.
But yeah, I'm glad you didn't say Eric Hosmer though. I would have had to veto that as a likable player. But yeah, and then
but actually, one more thing on that. It's just interesting because the Cubs do have first base prospect Matt Mervis, who's on the precipice of the majors right now. So I think if Hosmer doesn't pan out and doesn't play well initially in this season, and Mervis is raking at AAA, you could very easily see the Hosmer Cubs tenure end very quickly because he's making the league minimum. It's not like they have to hold on to him for any reason. So
yeah, that's true. So and wouldn't be surprised if they almost just kind of used him as a he's not a top prospect. He's probably not incredibly likely to be a rookie of the year, so they might try and service time manipulate him still.
good.
So,
And then the last one, Nelson Cruz is signing with the Padres. 1 year, $1 million. So he could have probably played somewhere else for more money, but goes to a really good team. I feel like he's not really an everyday player at this point. With that kind of commitment that they're making, it doesn't seem like he's going to be DHing all the time, but he'll at least bat against the lefties and probably mix in there once in a while. I mean,
yeah, 2022 was hands down his worst season of his career. He in 507 plate appearances had a 234. Yeah, 234, 313, 337 slash line. That's a 651 OPS for a guy who is known as this like massive power hitter. He only had 10 homers after having a total of 32 in 2021. Like massive drop off in power. and he had about the same amount of plate appearances. So something is going on with Nelson Cruz. And at the age of 42, it kind of feels like age might finally be catching up with him. So it is kind of at the point where I don't think teams are going to give him the ability to go out and try and hit 30 home runs this year. I mean, if he gets hot, then maybe they'll do what the Cardinals did last year, where at the beginning, Pujols was kind of rotating in, and then in the second half, he got hot and they just let him go. Maybe that happens, but
And I definitely wouldn't put past Nelson Cruz. Like as you stated, he was really good as recently as 2 years ago. So I wouldn't I wouldn't be shocked.
yeah, like there's definitely a world in which like he massively overproduces his $1 million salary. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. So, I think that Nelson Cruz here is actually a really good segue into kind of what we're about to start talking about, though, because this is a guy who he kind of started a little bit later as far as like regular playing time in the majors. Like he didn't really have um, he didn't play 100 games until 2009 at age 28, even though he debuted back in 2005 at the age of 24. But then he just had this prodigious power. Maybe not prodigious, but like this consistent high power output. And he's kind of one of those guys that like it's kind of, to me, it sucks to see him not being good, because this is a guy that I always think of as being like one of the power hitters in Major League Baseball. I don't know if do you have anything to add to that? If not, I'm gonna.
Yeah, he just was definitely a late bloomer, and then obviously he's got the PED thing on his ledger. But I feel like people don't. His legacy is like, oh, this is like really old guy that still hits a bunch of home runs. People have forgotten about the PEDs and stuff
Yeah,
because he's just more likable. Maybe I don't know. He's got an interesting story.
yeah, and his PEDs was like really early in his career too, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Like it was around that 2008 timeframe, I think.
I think it might have been like 2012 ish, but
2013 he played 110 games. Could have been that season, but he was at 150 games plus every other year around that. So, but kind of the reason that I want to use Nelson Cruz here is this is a guy with a career 274 average, 218 hits, 459 home runs. Like he's one of the guys who's kind of putting up the counting stats where you start to think, is this a Hall of Famer in 2023? And that's a debate that I think we're kind of starting to go through with the Hall of Fame. I know the ballots are out right now. There's like 100 and something of them that have been like made public to this point. And we've got some guys who on public ballots are looking like they're going to be able to qualify for the Hall of Fame this year. Probably not when it's all said and done, like Helton and Roland. But this is a year after we lost all of the PED guys. All. The original big PED guys of the baseball renaissance in the 90s. And I was kind of thinking it is a huge miss for them to not be in the Hall of Fame. I understand that the Hall of Fame is kind of designed, like the way it's being used right now is kind of designed to showcase the amazing players that also don't have any kind of dirt on their names whatsoever. If someone's personality is a little tarnished or very tarnished in the case of some players, or they've been rumored to be on PEDs, maybe they didn't get in, but they have the numbers that say they should have been in, and they had the effect on baseball where I think they should have got in. Is that kind of a fair take?
I think that's true that that's the standard and that's what they're shooting for. But when you look at some of the people who have been enshrined in the Hall of Fame, they don't really necessarily meet those criteria. And that's what makes it frustrating sometimes to see the way people are voted in and the way people are not voted in also.
Yeah, because there was that stretch in like the 70s, I think it was, where people were like, especially on like the era committees, people were just getting voted in because their friends were on the committees. And so, and that's kind of like a historically known era
Right.
of the Hall of
And
Fame.
there's cheaters in the Hall of Fame, right? There's
Yep.
bad people in the Hall of Fame, terrible humans.
Yeah, and so now we're having kind of a public trial, if you will, on these guys' personalities, and they're a lot. Some of them are very awful people, 100%. Do not condone anything they've done. Any of the cheating, don't condone that. But it does kind of beg the question: is there a spot for them in the Hall of Fame museum that tells the history of baseball? It should tell the good and the bad, show the bright spots and the blemishes, right? And
Absolutely, yeah.
we're just trying to paint a rosy picture, it seems. So, kind of got us thinking, how would we build the Hall of Fame? And I think the answer lies in the name. A hall is one room. It's really weird if you have one room with 6 different wall colors, 3 different types of carpet, you got a toilet and a bed and whatever in it. It just doesn't make sense for a room, does it?
No.
Unless you're in a studio apartment, I guess, but whatever. What about, I don't know, a building with multiple rooms? Say a house. What about the House of Fame? So this is our House of Fame. We've kind of been thinking about it, and there's so many different aspects that make someone worth remembering in baseball. And some of them are the greatest players that you've ever seen. Some of them are some of the absolute worst players you've ever seen, or worst humans you've ever seen, but they've still done something to the game that is worth remembering. And so I kind of want to go through this exercise with you, Gowie, and then please feel free to participate in the chat or on social media. We'll definitely post a graphic for you to do this as well. But I kind of want to go through, like, what are the different areas of a Hall of Fame that we would have? Like, what do they exemplify? Maybe who would be in them? So I kind of want to start with, and I don't have it marked here, and I probably should. So let me add a little text box real quick so I can type this in. But I kind of want to start with the structure of the house. And that structure is all built upon a sturdy foundation. Without a sturdy foundation, a house is just going to fall. Baseball is nothing with, oh, whoops. That is not what I wanted to do. Baseball's nothing without its foundation, how we got to where we are today. And that's kind of, like, you could think about it in a lot of ways. Like, is that the greatest players that everyone remembers? Is that, I don't know, the people who designed the game? Or is it something different? And in my personal opinion, the foundation of the game is what brings all of us to it. That is the kind of groundbreaking trailblazers of the game that have taken it from being this game created in the 1800s that was kind of predominantly for white men, especially in the era or the televised leagues or nationally recognized leagues, and turned it into what we have today. So that's kind of what I think the foundation of baseball is. I don't know if you have a different take on that. I've got some examples.
Yeah, I think that was really well summarized. I think you should go ahead and tell us who you're thinking about, and I can see if I can add on.
I think there's 3 big ones, and it's breaking the color barrier. Jackie Robinson, taking it from a white man's game to an everyman's game. And I say everyman, Jackie Robinson took it to every American's game. But then on top of him, we had Roberto Clemente come in. And Roberto Clemente kind of was the groundbreaker for Latinx players in Major League Baseball. Now we're seeing people of different races, different ethnicities, now from different countries with Roberto Clemente. And the only thing that's left is breaking the sex barrier or the gender barrier. And Alyssa Nakken has been doing exactly that. we have not seen a major league player who is a woman to this point. We've not seen an affiliated minor league player that is a woman to this point. We have Atlantic League and Frontier League. We've seen it there. But in like the actual minor league systems, we've not. But Alyssa Nacken has come in and she's an on-field coach for the San Francisco Giants, and she is like the best representation that we have in the game today of women in baseball. And I think that is the next step where baseball is growing, and that's how the house is going to expand. Because first you have to expand the foundation to be able to grow the house.
So mine is related to Jackie Robinson, who I believe belongs in this foundation of baseball. But along with Jackie Robinson, like Branch Rickey, who is the guy that brought Jackie Robinson into um, Major League Baseball, and he was also the guy that basically created the minor leagues, and that has so many effects on the game that we see today. Um, but Jackie Robinson being the one of the biggest foundational pieces of the history of baseball, because he broke that barrier, and we have a better thing now than we did prior to that happening. So um, Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson.
I like those picks. That's actually something that I hadn't considered, is the reason that Jackie was even allowed to play. Because like, yeah, he broke the color barrier, but there were a lot of people who had to do stuff in order to give him that opportunity. And like, I still think that all the focus should be on Jackie, because that is like being brave enough to do that at that time is the single biggest thing out of all of that. But Branch Rickey had the wherewithal to say, why is this not a thing? Let's do it. I don't care what the backlash is, and he did it. And so yeah, that's actually a really good point that I hadn't considered. Like, without him, Jackie wouldn't have had the opportunity and the game wouldn't have grown. So that's a really good pick there. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
And some of the other trailblazers that even came after Jackie Robinson, um, like Larry Doby, who broke the color barrier in the American League, like these are the people that surely will be recognized in our hall here.
yeah, and Satchel Paige, to that point, being one of the first pitchers um, of color in the majors as well. So, yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about guys who fit in this category for probably a couple hours. But for the sake of time, let's get into the main house. And what's the best spot to start? Probably the front entryway, right?
I think so. That's
All
where
right.
I go.
So you walk into the house. What's the first thing that you see? There's the entry foyer, if you will, if you're fancy. It is an area of the house that is designed to be the first impression, and the first impression has to be something that you're proud of. It has to be something, or people tend to be a little bit showy, make it look a little fancy, and then they keep all their clutter over in the corners and stuff where it's not in direct view of the front door. So the foyer in baseball, I would say, is probably some of these awe-inspiring kind of faces of baseball, the people that are pop culture icons, that people outside of baseball, if they think of a baseball player, that's one of the guys that they name. It's really easy for me to think of these from like current players. I think Jazz Chisholm is one of those guys. Juan Soto is one of those guys. Aaron Judge is one of those guys. Shohei Ohtani, one of those guys. Going back in history, Bob Gibson is that guy. I mean, the dude was so good that they changed the rules because of him, because everyone was watching him throw that 168 ERA season in 1968. So that's kind of where I see the foyer of our House of Fame.
Yeah, I'll just add one more from the '90s. Every kid wanted to be Ken Griffey Jr. He's like total face of baseball, just role model and superstar also.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And And I should probably mention, just because we're putting a guy in a certain room does not mean that they couldn't be in really any of the rooms. That's the beauty of a house. Is like you could walk from room to room, you could be anywhere, and there's very good justification for a lot of these guys to be in a bunch of different rooms. And Ken Griffey Jr. is one of the guys, and Bob Gibson are some of the guys that I'm going to be talking about here a little bit later, which are kind of exactly the what we're talking about there. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really good point because it's like I think the main point of the foyer here is like it's some of the guys that maybe at the end of their career they're not going to be no doubt Hall of Famers. It's not the guys like your Babe Ruth. Like yeah, I mean he could obviously be in the foyer, but this is kind of an area of the hall that I foresee being some of these young guys that we were really excited about. They kind of started changing the game a little bit. Like, I mean, Jazz Chisholm and to a point, Fernando Tatis, and I say to a point because I'll talk about him later too. Um, their electricness on the field and their personality is starting to grow the game into a little bit more what we're seeing in basketball, where it's kind of player focused and not just team focused. And so you're starting to see these personalities of the players and see them from a pop culture standpoint. So that's kind of
Yeah,
the yeah.
I guess question for you. So we've seen players change the game in recent years. That's what we've grown up watching and stuff. But when maybe players didn't have as much freedom of expression, who would be some guys that might fit this category from the past, further back?
So that's a great question. And that's kind of why I thought like a guy like Bob Gibson, a guy like Nolan Ryan, like Nolan Ryan in his chase for 5,000 strikeouts, like, yeah, he took like 27 years to do it or something, but like that's something that even 27 years, 5,000 strikeouts is insane. So like people were tuning in to watch that. People would talk about him just because of that. Like they were who they thought of. In the 90s, I don't know. It'd almost be like I think Cal Ripken Jr. maybe would be a good one for the 90s. Um,
Yeah, that's a good one. He was a guy that everyone could look to as awesome because of how many games he played. Like that, it's applicable to any job. If you do, go to your job every single day, perform at a high level, that's like really admirable for people across any profession.
yeah, especially like given like now people are starting to actually understand burnout, mental fatigue, and all that in just daily life, and like realizing that they're not just cranky. It's like they're mentally struggling. Like he's having that and physical struggles because I guarantee he was hurt during that time and played through it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's astounding what he was able to do. So all right, so but I think we should probably move into another room though because we're literally just at the entrance to our wonderful House of Fame.
Yes.
What room do you want to go to next?
I think we should go to the kitchen because I'm always hungry.
I like
And
that.
the
Like
kitchen is a room for the people that are always grinding. They've got to cook. They've got other responsibilities, but they've got to cook for their families. They've got to cook for themselves. They've got to grind every day. And these are these could be like the role players that are certainly not being recognized by the Hall of Fame as we have it today. But we would like to recognize them for the incredibly important role that they play in baseball history and then in their teams themselves, because there's teams with superstars, but we see the Angels today, they can't win anything with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani because they don't have the right mix of secondary players and role players to support the superstars. So one guy that is coming to mind to me right now that belongs in the kitchen is Andrew Miller, who was a guy that took the role of pitching multiple innings in relief when one inning relief pitchers were kind of the norm at the time. And he started doing that in the postseason, um, pitching in the most high leverage spots, not just the ninth inning like traditional closers had in the past. And for a stretch of a couple of years, he was pretty much the best guy to be doing that role. So he'd be like a guy that would fit in the kitchen for me.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. I like that a lot. I hadn't really considered a guy like him just because I don't know. You kind of forget about um you forget
The
about
glue.
relievers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
You
Andrew
need you
Miller.
need them.
Andrew Miller was a closer for part of his career. He was a setup man for part of his career. He did whatever was needed. He was the fireman, is what he was. And like he's not really going to be remembered much for that. He's going to be a guy who makes a Hall of Fame ballot. I don't think he's going to get elected with the way that we do it now. But yeah, he 100% should be remembered. And to that point, it's like, now I guess maybe not to that point, but kind of another way to think of it is like you've got all these guys who are maybe not seen even to the level of Andrew Miller. Some of these guys who were basically career pinch hitters, like Lenny Harris, 212 career pinch hits. Mark Sweeney, 175 career pinch hits. Who's the one that?
Matt Stairs had 23 pinch hit home runs, which is the record. So
Yeah, it's like these are guys that they had a role. They were not necessarily the most toolsy of players, but they had something that was really, really good about them. And they were used consistently for a long time. Because to hit 23 pinch hit home runs, you have to play for a long time. And Matt Stairs had, let's see, how long was his career? 92 to 2011. So he played almost 20, or he did play 20 years. He didn't play in 1994 because of the strike season, or the strike year. But yeah, he played for 19 years, had 6,000 career plate appearances. He had surprisingly 265 home runs. Like he's a guy who was out there grinding every day anyway. And then to be able to come in and pinch hit and be able to do it at that level for so long, that's worth remembering. I forgot I was supposed to be typing. Let's see. Yeah, and there's a ton of other ways that you could kind of use the metaphor of the kitchen though too, because like you could always go guys who are like throwing absolute gas, because you cook with gas, right? You could go with Bartolo Colon. The dude never stopped eating.
yeah.
Actually,
And you
he's
can also
another
go-
good one though for this. Bartolo Colon, for 4 years that he pitched, like he was really good for some of those years, but just the longevity of him.
Yeah.
Like, so actually, yeah, Bartolo kind of fits for two reasons.
Yeah, that's a good one. And another role in the kitchen is using many tools. So like a utility man, like a Ben Zobrist. Probably not going to make the Hall of Fame, but he played so many positions so well. There's very few guys in baseball history that have done what he did, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. So, but yeah, like I think the kitchen is kind of all purpose anyway. Like you can do a lot of stuff in the kitchen.
There's a lot to be done, yeah.
There's a lot to be done. So there's a lot of ways to interpret that, but I do really like where we're going with it. I do kind of want to take just a little. I want to take out the garbage here, and not the garbage is like the bad players, but like trash cans usually in the garage. So I want to take a run out to the garage real quick and talk about that if you don't mind.
Sure, let's go.
So the garage is a little bit different because so far we've only talked about players. You mentioned Branch Rickey. Fantastic. Not a player. Alyssa Knockin, same thing, but she is definitely a foundational trailblazer. But the garage is where the Tinkerers play. That's where you're going to work on your car. That's where you're going to do any of like the construction projects for stuff that you're doing in your house. That's where the tinkerers are. And so I kind of think this is the best spot to talk about like the commissioners, the owners, the GMs, maybe some of the managers that have had such a huge role on baseball, or even to that point, umpires, guys who aren't the known product, but without them, the house would fall into disrepair. And so this is kind of where Branch Rickey, I think, fits here, obviously. Joe West. I would put Joe West here. He's the longest tenured umpire of all time. Without him, there are tons of games that could have gone in any direction, and he had the say in how that went. And for better or worse, like he's the reason that the game is where it is today, or one of. So like he 100% should be in here.
Yeah, I gotta put my guy in here, and my this guy, I actually thought of like a ton of guys that can fit in um this area, the basement garage kind of area, because there's a lot of stuff that's happened in baseball history, but one guy that had a major impact, and it wasn't necessarily good impact, was Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was the commissioner in the mid 1900s for like a very long time. He let gambling kind of run rampant through the league. He kept the league segregated, and he ruled very harshly. And he was actually the guy that banned the Black Sox, the 1919 Chicago White Sox team, from baseball. So he had a major impact on the history of baseball, and not in a good way for the most part. So
Yeah. I do think we've mentioned two guys that I think a lot of people are like, they suck. We hate them.
yeah,
Probably worth mentioning. Theo Epstein also goes in the garage. Like
yep.
he, as a GM, basically took the Red Sox and the Cubs and turned them both into World Series championship teams.
Mhm.
And then now he's working in the front office of Major League Baseball. Like his hands are all over modern baseball,
Yeah.
behind the
He
scenes
has
where you
such an
don't see it.
impact on just how modern front offices kind of operate today. I would say that he was kind of the trailblazer for that. And there's so many facets of a front office now. It's not just one GM making a bunch of decisions like how it used to be maybe 25 years ago or something.
Yeah.
It's it's a major effort, major team.
Yeah. Um, tons of other guys that could fit here, but like I really want to know what you guys' thoughts are. So make sure to let us
Yep.
know through social media who you would put in the garage here or any of these rooms. Um, I think the next spot we should probably go, and I realize it doesn't make sense with the graphic I've got, but we're working in the garage. We got some stuff we got to store. Let's go put it in the attic. Um, the attic is kind of where you put stuff that you've used it, you might use it again. It's useful, but you don't use it on a daily basis. It needs to be stored somewhere until you use it again. And this is where I see like some of these players that are gadget players. The absolute perfect example of this is Terrence Gore. Terrence Gore has 3 World Series rings. He has like 170 career plate appearances, maybe. Um, like he is so freaking fast, and he is used as a pinch runner in the postseason. He is a gadget that you can plug into your team to steal you a couple bases and maybe steal the winning run in the World Series. And that is something that very much needs to be recognized in the House of Fame.
Yep. And my guy's Eddie Gaedel, the smallest player to ever appear in a major league game. He was 3'7". It was sort of just a stunt, but this is the kind of stuff that has happened in the history of this game, and that's why it's worth recognizing. And that was actually done by Bill Veeck, who is one of the most interesting owners slash executives that baseball's had. He had so many different innovations for the game of baseball. Some of
I,
them didn't quite work out, but
I actually have a little trivia fact for you here.
good.
Um, so Eddie Goodell had one plate appearance in the majors. He wore the number like what was it?
1/8.
1/8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, they actually to get a jersey his size, they stole it from the Bat Boy. Do you know who that Bat Boy was for the St. Louis Browns when Eddie Goodell made his plate appearance?
I do not.
Bill DeWitt Jr., owner of the St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's just something that it's always astounded me. It's like, how was Bill DeWitt Jr. in that situation and now owns the Cardinals, the team that's left in the city that happened? Because that was with the Browns, who are now the Baltimore Orioles. But it's just an astounding fact to me. So do you got any other guys who would maybe fit in this attic style room where it's your really toolsy guys? They have kind of one thing. Matt Stairs, well, maybe not Matt Stairs, because like we said, he had 200 and some home runs and only 20 of them were pinch hitting, but like guys that pretty much only are defensive substitutions, like a modern guy, and he's a rookie, so like he's probably going to get a lot more playing time, especially now that he got traded to actually, I'm going to change my mind and not talk about him because he's going to prove me wrong immediately. But Ben DeLuzio for the Cardinals last year, he was a rookie. He was like 28. He came in pretty much exclusively to defensive sub. Like I think he got like 4 or 5 like plate appearances or something in the 20 odd games that he played. Like those are guys that would fit here too. Maybe he's not the perfect example, but I'm sure there's guys that I'm not familiar with that fit that role.
Yeah, that played that role even more prominently, where they did that for like a majority of their career or something like that.
Yeah. So, um, kind of think we should talk about the living room because it's kind of similar to a point, like in kind of the way that I see it. So the attic is guys who have like one tool that's useful, but it's maybe not the absolute best of that tool. Whereas like the living room, or that's where I play my video games. That's where I play board games with my family. It's where I do puzzles. It's where I show off my skills. And so that's kind of the room where I think all the skillsiest players should be. And these are guys like one of the most prodigious power hitters that we've ever seen from a raw power standpoint is Giancarlo Stanton. Like he's had a lot of injuries and some things that have kind of taken him off of that Hall of Fame track for the way that the Hall of Fame is now. But like he still has a chance to hit 500 home runs in his career. And we've never seen a guy hit the ball that hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Since we've been able to measure it, yeah, no one's hit the ball hard. So makes us think that he's got to be up there in the history of baseball, of
yeah,
the hardest hitters. Um, I got one guy in Eric Davis who actually ended up having a pretty long career. He made some All-Star teams, won the World Series, but he never truly reached his full potential because of all the injuries that he faced in his career. But when people talk about Eric Davis, they just talk about how he was one of the most skilled players in all facets of the game as any player they had ever seen. He threw the ball harder, he hit the ball like further and ran super fast. This is a guy that's not he's also not a Hall of Famer, but he had all the elements of a Hall of Fame career as the Hall of Fame is currently. He just couldn't necessarily put it together. And there's plenty of players that are in this category. He's just one that I picked out.
yeah. So I've got two other guys, and you could argue it's four in a sense with how I'm going to describe it, but the best stealer or base stealer of all time, Ricky Henderson, obviously could very easily be in a different room here, but he had what, 1,472 steals or something close to that, which is about 500 more than the next guy, Lou Brock. This is kind of the room where you'd show them off, I think, or from a pitching standpoint, Aroldis Chapman, 105-mile-an-hour pitch. Jordan Hicks also threw 105. You could maybe make an argument for him, but those are guys who did something that has never been done before, that is not inherently a Hall of Fame thing, but it's something that has changed the game. Like, now all relievers are trying to be more like Chapman on the field. Very big asterisk there, on the field.
I've got one kind of along the same lines of not necessarily a Hall of Fame trait, but just doing something better than anyone else, is Javier Baez making tags. Like, who does that better than he has done? It's such a cool skill to have, but it's not necessarily, doesn't make you an amazing baseball player. It's just something super cool.
Yeah, that's a great point, because just his defensive skills, and I would almost argue his just like awareness of the game, like the play in Pittsburgh where was it Michael Chavis decided to run in and try and tag him instead of just going and tagging the base on a very obvious force out on a bunt. Javi started running back towards the plate. There was that whole thing, and he ended up on, was it second or third by the end of the play?
Second base, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up on second base. Would have possibly got to third because there was another throwing error.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like just his awareness, and that's kind of how he's able to make those tags. It's just some of his awareness of like where things are on the field, is something that is unparalleled. All right, we're down to 3 rooms, and we're getting to, I think, a little bit closer to where the conversation started. But we've kind of been on the house tour long enough. Kind of got to go use the bathroom. Let's start there. The bathroom is kind of the room for people who need to freshen up. Guys who were phenomenal ball players, but something has tarnished their career, be it off the field things, be it PEDs, which I guess would be off the field, but like it helps them on the field. Guys like that. So this is where you would take your Barry Bonds. This is where you put your Roger Clemens, where you put your your Kurt Schilling. Like, he was phenomenal in the field, horrible person. Like, that's kind of where I think the bathroom is. But then I'll let you go, but I'm have another thought there.
Yeah, the ones that are coming to mind for me are along the same lines. Guys like Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, they were huge for the game of baseball in the 90s for bringing it back with the home run chase and everything. But we know, years later that they were not doing it necessarily in a legal way. But also, that's a part of baseball that we can't forget, because it was so important to where we are today. And also, it was sort of, MLB turned the blind eye to this happening. So they shouldn't be penalized the way they are. Yeah, making the Hall of Fame for it.
There was no enforcement of that rule or punishment at the time. We're punishing them now because we failed to do so 20 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
Which is dumb. Like, if we hold guys out of the Hall of Fame in the future for using spider tack, well, then that's exactly in the same spot where they didn't enforce a rule, period. So if you don't enforce a rule, it's basically not there.
Yep.
And now we're punishing people for that now.
And this is
Um,
probably the room of Pete Rose as well, right?
it
We
is the
have to
room
put
of
him
Pete
here.
Rose. Um, the greatest. I don't know that the greatest hitter of all time makes sense, but the most hits in the history of baseball. Um, but he got banned from the game for gambling, and he's not really done a very good job of showing any kind of contrition ever since. So like he's failed at freshening up his reputation. I do want to pose a question to you now, and that's around a really really young player that I kind of mentioned earlier, Fernando Tatis Jr., one of the most electric players in the game today. Got that massive deal, was the face of the Padres, uh, had his motorcycle crashes that was kind of a big deal, but like, okay, we could let that pass. But then he gets the PED suspension. He's still only what, 24, 25?
Yeah, 24,
Like,
25. Yeah.
does he go in the bathroom? Like, he still has a long time to recover from that. And we're seeing from guys like A-Rod and Gary Sheffield that, like, and David Ortiz to a point, granted, he was just rumored to be on steroids, never proven. Um, but there's guys in the hall that did steroids if they're good enough. It's these ones that we're talking about that are just straight up, they can't be in the hall today. But does Tatis really fit with this group?
Tatis, I would say that he's halfway in between the hall and the bathroom, but we don't know which way he's going, and that's for him to tell us. And the way he responds to the mistakes that he made, and um, kind of the way the the perception of his being evolves as his career goes on. Like if he plays well enough, then people may not hold the PED thing over his head anymore. Kind of like how Nelson Cruz is in that state now. I mean, I feel like people don't talk about that with him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, shoot, his name's too long for the room that I've got. It's awkward. Um, yeah, like there's tons of guys that are already in the hall that were on steroids of some kind or cheated in some way, shape, or form, and we forgave them, and they're in. And Fernando Tatis is kind of at a crossroads. He could go into any of these rooms right now. He could go into what we haven't talked about yet, but head of house or immediate family in the living or in the bedrooms there. He could go back to the foyer. He could be in the like. He could be anywhere here, but we don't know what he's doing, and I don't know that he does right now. So until he kind of decides what he's going to do and how he's going to recover from his mistakes, he's kind of just out there in oblivion in the hallway. So, all right. So that brings us to the bedrooms. This is where the people that live in the house spend maybe not most of their time, but this is their area. Other people aren't really allowed in it, typically, unless invited in. It's just rude to walk into someone's bedroom. This is where I think the no doubt, like, best players, the current Hall of Famers would go. And we've kind of separated it into two groups. And that's kind of how the Hall is now, too. You have inner circle Hall of Famers, and then you have Hall of Famers, but they're not the best of the best. And that's kind of how you distinguish these two. And I kind of want to talk about them together because of that. It's kind of hard to distinguish, well, who's inner circle, who's like the best of all time. And Babe Ruth, Mike Trout,
Babe Ruth.
no one's
Yeah.
going to argue that they're not the best of all time. So head of house for them. But then you get to guys like Stan Musial, Ty Cobb, Ted Williams. Like, they're probably head of house. Someone could probably argue they go into immediate family. But then, like, immediate family, you've got guys like, I don't know who goes there. Like, maybe Ryan Sandberg. Is that where Cal goes? Like,
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. How do we draw that line? Where's the difference between the inner circle and the outer circle. I guess we don't actually have that line in the Hall of Fame now. So how do we draw that line in our house here?
Yeah. And I do have one guy that I think I know where I would put him, but I want to know where you would put him. Mariano Rivera.
I think I would put him in head of household because he was the best at his position or
That's
best
what I
to
was thinking
do
as
what
well.
he ever did. Yeah.
But it's one of those guys that like you when you initially think about it, it's really almost impossible to like say he's the same as Babe or he's similar to Babe Ruth.
Yeah. I get
He's
that.
and even like from some of the Nolan Ryan, like you can't compare Mariano Rivera and Nolan Ryan at all. And so it's really hard because he's like the first inner circle reliever ever. Because a reliever is a relatively recent invention in baseball anyway, especially at the way that he was used.
Hmm.
So, but so like the head of house is like your Ruth Trout Rivera, but like who's a guy that like maybe fits into the immediate family? Like they're incredibly good. They deserve to be in this like best of the best class of they're the main family members, but they're not the patriarch. They're not the head of the household.
So you're talking about still in the immediate family.
Yeah,
Okay.
still in the immediate
Um,
family.
yeah, I'm thinking about maybe you guys like Mickey Mantle. I don't know. I feel like Willie Mays and like Hank Aaron need to also be in the head of household, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So talking about like um,
So
Randy Johnson,
I was gonna say
Greg Maddox.
maybe let me give you an example here of who I'm thinking, and that might help a little bit. So I'm thinking this is even guys that are like this is your Larry Walker. Like he's a Hall of Famer, and now especially like because he's in. Um, your Scott Rowlands, these guys who were so good, but no one really recognized. You're Joey Votto. You're kind of those players is kind of who I'm thinking of in the immediate family. Like I would almost still put Mickey Mantle in like the
Yeah, the
inner
inner
circle,
circle. Sure,
but
that makes sense. Yeah,
so
it's. I think it's a good idea because it's just more recognition for um, the really really good players that are not necessarily in the Hall of Fame today,
yeah,
or just barely made it in or something.
yeah, and maybe the other thing here is in this part so far, other than Joey Votto and Trout, we've only mentioned people who are retired and either in the Hall of Fame or really close to being in. What about some of these young players we got? What about like Vladdy, Juan Soto? I kind of feel like they go in these rooms too.
Yeah, I think so. We can definitely put like Juan Soto in the head of household just with the way his career trajectory has started. He's got the world championship to his name already. I mean, he's
Yeah,
one of the best players in the sport at this time. So that's got to count. That's got to have a big weight on where he fits into this house.
he's one of the best currently. He has those accolades. He's as young as he is, and he's being compared to Ted Williams every day, who is very much head of house. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think Juan Soto is definitely head of household. This is also where you'd put like your oh, I don't know. Like your current like elite pitchers, your Kershaw, your Verlander, your Scherzer. What are they? Like that's such a difficult one because it's like they're the best of what we've seen in the last 20 years, hands down. But compared to like a Randy Johnson or a Nolan Ryan, are they still head of house or is that like I don't know. It's kind of tough.
Yeah, because it's hard to compare cross era So I think we got to give him credit for being the best of this era, and maybe those guys do belong in head of household as well.
Yeah. I'm not gonna write them down on here just because I don't really have a whole lot of space and I don't want to clutter up too much more. But um, we've only scratched the surface of guys who could be in any of these rooms for any justification that you could possibly think of. I want to hear your thoughts, because this is just Gowie and I and how we would create the Hall of Fame. Maybe you like the Hall of Fame the way it is now, but we want to hear your thoughts. So let us know, one, how you feel about the Hall of Fame now, or if you think that doing something a little bit more like this is better for baseball. Because we should mention there is a museum at Cooperstown with the Hall of Plaques, like next to the Hall of Plaques, that does have all of these guys represented in it in some way, shape, or form. It's just that's not what people think of when they think the Hall of Fame. And I think that's the biggest part for me is like you talk about the Hall of Fame and you only talk about the Hall of Plaques, but there's so much other stuff in there. David Freese's Game 6 home run in the 2011 World Series, that's a Hall of Fame moment. He didn't have a Hall of Fame career. That ball, his ripped up jersey is in the museum, but you could almost make an argument that he could maybe fit in one of these rooms in some way, shape, or form. And so it's kind of incorporating that Hall of Plaques and giving more recognition to the people with exhibits in the other side of the hall is kind of my entire.
I think this was an awesome exercise, and I think what we built here is maybe a better way to represent the game of baseball than the way that the current Hall of Fame tries to do. This is more all encompassing and just it acknowledges the good and the bad, not just this gold standard of select players. We need to tell the story of baseball, right?
Yeah.
And this is the way we would like to do it.
Yeah. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to take and I'm gonna maybe take a day or two to do this and try and get a slightly nicer looking graphic than the one that I've got here. But I'm gonna tweet out a similar graphic to this, and I want you guys um to fill out your own. Let us know who's in your house. So you can reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube comments or and let us know your thoughts there. Um, Especially if you disagree with where we put a guy. Like I said, they can be in a whole bunch of different rooms, but if you think a guy doesn't deserve to be where we have him, let me know. Love to argue it. But yeah, so that'd be, I think that'll be fun. So we'll get that up this week. I think that's really all we've got for today. We could keep going for a couple hours, but I feel like might be time for another glass of water. So, all right, cool. So thank you very much for hanging out with us, Gowie. Do you have any closing thoughts before I send us on out?
I don't think so.
All right, so thank you very much. We will see you guys back here next week. Can I is that set in stone?
Yeah.
Next week?
Yeah.
Can I tease that right now?
Sure.
Can I make the announcement
Sure.
with the name?
If you want, yeah.
All right, guys, you're going to be so excited for this. I'm so excited for this. We have a guest coming on next week, and it is a big guest for us. You're maybe not going to recognize his name at first glance. Definitely check out the announcement tweet that we're going to put out here tomorrow. We're going to have Ryan Lautos on next week. He is a AAA pitcher. I know I'm going to get people saying you're only doing this because he's in the Cardinals organization. I didn't even get this guest. Gowie did. So blame him. But he is a AAA pitcher, and he also works part-time in the front office for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's coming on to talk to us next week. We're going to have a phenomenal time with him. So please make sure to come back for that. Make sure to let people know that we're doing that, because I think that's probably going to be the single biggest episode we've ever done. So, anything else? Do you want to temper expectations?
Nope.
All right. So that's it for us. We will see you back next week, Tuesday at 8:30 with Ryan Loudhouse. So thank you very much and have a great night.
If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube so that you never miss a future episode. On YouTube, you got to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell to get notifications. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod.